The Loret Organ, considered to be the rarest organ in England, has been rediscovered in a secondary school in Hammersmith.
This is the only organ by Loret that's in the country. That makes it very rare for us.
So how fantastic is that?
However, this is not just the story of a rare organ, but in fact the history behind it, and the women who risked their lives to bring it here. This is the rediscovery of the lost Loret. Our journey begins less than a year ago in Hammersmith at the Sacred Heart High School. Today, I've come in to meet the school's Director of Communications, Alex Dijkhuis, who had begun researching the organ with the intention of bringing the broken instrument back to life, unaware of what she was about to discover.
The organ hasn't worked, certainly all the time I've been here, which is 13 years. I think probably at least 15 years it hasn't worked. And so I called in an organ restorer just to come and have a look and do a condition survey and work out what's wrong with it and how much it might possibly cost to restore it.
The organ is currently held in the school's chapel, built over 180 years ago after the site's purchase.
The chapel was designed by John Francis Bentley. The window at the back was filled with stone and painted with the saints, and he put in an organ behind a stone screen on the right. We have slowly over time been trying to restore aspects of the chapel. Now the whole place is beginning to look a little bit more like a sacred space.
But what is the history behind the organ? The Society of the Sacred Heart was founded at the turn of the 19th century in Paris by Saint Madeleine Sophie Barras. By this time, Catholicism in France was under increasing attack since the French Revolution, with the state seizing control of church property. By the end of the 19th century, the French government was determined to close down monasteries, convents and faith schools.
She set up the society in Paris in the 1800s, but in the early 1900s, when France began to move to secularisation, they knew that they were going to be expelled from France.
By the time the expulsions in France began, the new Superior General of the Society, Mother Mabel Digby, had begun organising the Society's evacuation, exporting various assets and members across the world to avoid persecution, including the organ. Today, the Provincial of the Sacred Heart, Sister Cath Lloyd, gives an insight on what that evacuation looked like.
At the time of the story we're talking about in regard to the organ, she was living in France and she was a leader of the congregation. And she oversaw the evacuation of all the sisters from France because the French government had decided that they were going to move towards secularisation. So they wanted to expel all the congregations, particularly those that focused on education. And so she, in response to that, organised the evacuation of all our possessions and assets because she was determined that the French government wasn't going to get their hands on them. And she turned a crisis into an opportunity. On her desk were requests for foundations for schools and convents all around the world. And so she sent all those sisters off to different parts of the world to set up new convents and schools. And that's why today we're so very international. One of the things that she organised was the movement of the organ, the Loret organ, from France to Hammersmith. I mean, around this school is evidence of the same movement of possessions. So the statue, the Sacred Heart statue here, which is iconic in all the schools and universities of the Sacred Heart. This particular one came from our school in Lille, and she was determined that the French authorities wouldn't get their hands on it, so she had it shipped over here. It was a major operation, and it wasn't just to England, it was all over the world. So if you go around the society now, you will find all sorts of things. You'll find clocks, you'll find dressers, you'll find tables, and they all had been sent from France in those years of 1902, 1903, 1904. So it must have been a major operation.
In order to get some more information, the Society of the Sacred Heart visited Rome's National Archives to read up on the Society's history.
We found that when the Society were expelled from France, in the periods just before that, they had a boarding school in Paris. It was actually their headquarters. It was called Hotel Biron. The main building was a boarding school, and at the back of the garden there was the mother house and a day school and a poor school, and they used the money raised from the boarding school to run the other two schools on the site. We found out from the archives that there were organs on that site, and there is a lovely note in the archives in Rome talking about the migration of the organs, and the one in the mother house was sent to San Remo. The one from the boarding school was sent by train to Budapest, and the one from the day school came to Hammersmith. And we have records in the English archives of the organ being rebuilt here. It left France in 1904, it arrived here the same year, and we have the records and we know the company that rebuilt it. So now we know where it came from, but that doesn't solve the mystery of who built it, who put it together.
Alex had contacted the Royal Festival Hall's organ curator, Dr. William McVicker, to take a look at the instrument.
When he opened the lid, he was sort of dumbstruck. He was beginning to doubt, was this actually the original organ that was put in by Bentley or not? He had tried to look up the organ before he came here, but he couldn't find it anywhere on the National Organ Register, so to a large extent it was a completely unknown entity.
Before Dr. William McVicker arrived at the school, he had been expecting to see a pipe organ by the maker Thomas Christopher Lewis, a well-known friend of Bentley. However, when studying the organ, he discovered something extraordinary.
When I was first contacted, I fully expected to come here and find the ruins of a Lewis organ. But when I stepped up to the organ itself and opened the music desk here, what did I find? A whole list of stops in French. Well, Thomas Christopher Lewis was decidedly influenced by German organ building in the second half of the 19th century, and I knew immediately that that couldn't be a Lewis organ. So who was the organ by?
He said there was a possibility, it looked like it might have been made by Loret. I had no idea who Loret was. Of course, I've since looked him up. There's a man called Hippolyte Loret.
And I saw on one of the lists of the stop, here it is, just over here, it says flûte pyramidale, pyramidal flute. Pyramidal flute, flûte pyramidale, is very rare, and I've only ever seen one once, and that was in Notre-Dame de Finistère in Brussels, in the centre of Brussels. And the organ was by Hippolyte Loret.
But he said, I can't believe it's a Loret. If it's a Loret, it would be the rarest organ I've ever seen.
It was certainly a defining moment for me, because I've never come across a Loret organ in England. This is the only organ by Loret that's in the country. That makes it very rare for us.
This was further confirmed by the Society of the Sacred Heart's trip to Rome.
The archivist in Rome said, it's really coincidental that you're asking about the organ, because I've been approached recently by a Parisian organist and historian of musical instruments called Eric Humbercloud, who has been searching for a particular Loret organ, and I'm thinking this might be the organ that he's been looking for. So obviously we spoke to Eric Humbercloud, who is a Loret expert. He had a catalogue, and that catalogue shows all the organs that Hippolyte Loret built, and the pièce de résistance is that Eric has a letter written by Hippolyte Loret to the Society about his making of the organ for the day school, which we know is the one that we have. So now that we know the background to the organ, how it was saved by the Society from France, it gives it this additional importance really to the school. It's something, if we can get it working again, will be treasured. This is an incredibly rare artefact. I understand the rarest in England. So how fantastic is that?
It's an opportunity to restore an organ which really has deep connectivity with the society and the order from its days in Paris, and was brought here. It would have been very exciting to be an English organ builder in 1904 and told to go to Paris and ship out an organ to bring it back to Hammersmith.
I've been around the school, associated it for about 30 years now, and I've spent a lot of time in that chapel, and I've just seen an organ. And it's always seemed to me a sadness that there haven't been many people able to play it. But to then discover that it's this very rare artefact is actually quite, is very moving. And when you actually then also uncover the story of how it came to be here and the sacrifices that were made by the people to get it here, I think it leaves me feeling we are bound in a way to honour their memory by having it restored and used, and that beautiful sound can be shared with as many people as possible.